Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend this next hour together. And you know it, I am hoping that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. And that leads me to my opening observations. You see, you matter, I matter, Black people matter. And because of that, it's important that all people understand our history, the significant contributions and accomplishments that we've made, and the challenges that we've had to overcome. Well, tonight on this program, we're going to talk about Black history because it's the school season. It's open now. Students are going back to school virtually, or in some cases, actually physically going into the classroom. It's important more now than ever in the wake of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and Jacob Blake. It's more important now than ever that we understand our history and we make it inclusive in all of American history. And that is what's underway with the program known as Black History 365 curriculum. You see, for decades and even centuries, teachers have been encouraged to tell a pretty lopsided story about America. Educators and decision makers within our system are also influenced by the lack of Black history curriculum and participate in the demise of historically forgotten communities. And by doing that, they accept negative stereotypes, display biases that we've seen take place in America, acting on fear of the unknown rather than respect for the greatness of a people, refusing to acknowledge the contributors and the contributions and challenges of Black Americans, and not challenging discriminatory behavior. So we have to challenge these norms by getting the story right. And so in tonight's program, we'll talk to a team of people who are doing just that, launching Black History 365 curriculum, because we need it now more than ever to tell our story. And those are my opening observations. And here now is an excerpt of a video displaying what Black History 365, why it's so important, and why it should matter to each and every one of us.
Our game-changing textbook, Black History 365, an inclusive account of American history, and its corresponding K-12 curriculum are designed to not only reveal the hidden, undertold, and misconceived portions of African American history, but also to cultivate an atmosphere of being authentic with each other about our nation's past with the intention to heal, not hurt.
Well, before we get into understanding our history with Black History 365 curriculum, it would be best for us to start with a man who made history, Coach John Thompson. And to talk to us about that is a man who has known him for many, many years. And he had so much influence upon him, John Thompson having an influence on him. His name is Mark Thompson. He is the host of Make It Plain, which is a successful and popular podcast. He's also a social activist. And a lot of that activism undoubtedly comes from his upbringing, but also the influence that Coach John Thompson, the famous coach from Georgetown, had upon his life when he was a Georgetown student. Mark, thanks for joining us today. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Kelly. It's an honor to be here to talk about Coach Thompson.
You know, wow, where do we begin? Because everyone knows that he's the first African-American coach to win the NCAA title as the coach of Georgetown. No one thought it would be possible, but in 1984, he took the impossible and made it possible. He was a man of great faith in his players, great faith in God and in people. How did he influence you beyond the court?
Well, the influence actually began before I met him, Kelly. I was born in 1966, so really too young to have witnessed the civil rights movement other than through my mother. And so a lot of the heroes growing up in my adolescence that I saw, there were examples to me of social justice activism, were actually athletes, quite frankly. I can remember like it was yesterday when Hank Aaron hit his 715th home run. That I didn't I didn't get to see Malcolm X and Dr. King, but I can imagine what it felt like to see them, because that's what I felt. Even though it was just hitting a home run, Kelly, that was a revolutionary act to me. And so as revolutionary was not 84, but 82. And you probably remember, out of nowhere, John Thompson, Patrick Ewing raced to the top in the Final Four. And the whole world stopped. Said, wait a minute, there's a black coach in the Final Four. There's a black team about to play the iconic Dean Smith and the Tar Heels. And we just couldn't believe it. And we saw this all black team. And of course, people, we didn't have Google. So Georgetown, what is that? Is that an HBCU? Is it a black school? And the Patrick wearing the T-shirt, goaltending every shot. More people remember that, I'm sure, than even Michael Jordan and James Worthy, because the presence was so large. So that too was something revolutionary. So Kelly, what that began in my generation was a lot of us as black kids who might have had an opportunity to go to college wanted to go to Georgetown because of John Thompson and Patrick Ewing. Yeah. And I applied, and somehow, not cum laude, but thank you laude, when I graduated from high school, Georgetown accepted me. And I hadn't met Coach Thompson at all. So, whatever Providence was involved in that. And then when I got there, he hired me to be one of his student managers. And I always say to people, Georgetown was not an HBCU, but McDonough Gymnasium was an HBCU. Being there under his tutelage, he was my most important teacher on that campus. And I think he was that way for all of us. And I had a perspective at the time, understanding the political impact of what he had done. By that time I got there, of course, he'd already won the national championship. He had been outspoken on so many issues. I went to Georgetown not just to be a manager or get the orthodox education, but to be a student of John Thompson.
It's remarkable when you can reflect on a man who had that great of influence upon you, and seeing it in you, Mark. You can only imagine what kind of influence he had on Patrick Ewing, Alonzo Mourning, and Allen Iverson. I remember covering AI when he was in a little bit of a skirmish, a trouble there in the Virginia area, in Hampton, Virginia. They prosecuted him, put him in jail. A governor had to step in to give him a pardon to get out of that situation. And it was Coach John Thompson who went in and actually helped save Allen Iverson's life, putting him on a straight path to stardom that he went on to get. He was like that with so many people. I never had the chance to meet him, Mark, but I saw the impact and effect that he had on. Tell me what it was like for you when you watched him walk off the court to make a statement in defense of Black players.
Yeah. Well, there were a couple times, of course, he walked off, he took the team off when there were racist epithets against Patrick in Philadelphia. And then he did it again with Prop 42. And Prop 42 was important when he did that because no one had ever done anything like that before. What Coach Thompson did then, Kelly, was finally he kind of pulled back the veil from what he had been doing as a coach, because a lot of what he was saying to us and teaching us was in the confines of his classroom, McDonough Gymnasium. But for the first time, you saw a head coach implement one of the long-standing tools of civil rights activism for African Americans. He walked off the court. He staged a boycott, and it forced people to say, well, wait a minute. there's a little bit something more going on here than basketball. He everything that we see the NBA players doing now, and even frankly some of the MLB players, and what we see Colin Kaepernick doing,
Mm-hmm.
John Thompson did that in 1989 in the tradition of what Bill Russell and Muhammad Ali had done years early, and Juan Carlos and Tommy Smith. But it was an isolated moment because there was a period of time between obviously Juan Carlos and Tommy Smith and Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali. There was a lapse in time, even between Hank Aaron. We recall when Hank Aaron hit his 7-14 home run, he said Major League Baseball. It was on the anniversary of Dr. King's martyrdom, and he said Major League Baseball should have had a moment of silence for Dr. King. We had not seen, and I believe that was in '74, for 10, 12, 15 years, we had not seen a lot of athletes stand up that way. And definitely not someone who was in charge, Kelly. Again, Big John was an athlete, he was a coach. So this was leadership. A lot of times leadership wouldn't do that. Your
Yeah.
job might be in jeopardy, especially if you're working at a white school, Lord have mercy. So when he did that, it took on a level of, I never forget that. I was there when he did it. I was right there. And it was one of the most powerful things I had ever seen. And then someone had the wisdom in the Capitol Center. You remember the old Capitol Center
Yep,
back
I
there,
remember.
memories back there. Someone had the wisdom, Kelly, to have a camera in the ceiling and take that overhead shot. And there's that iconic photo. We talked. And at this point, I had matured as a man. I was no longer 18, 19 years old. And at a point along the way, the the adolescent son becomes a man. And I remember Coach Thompson had begun to change the way that he addressed me and talked to me. Of course, all of us got cursed out by John Thompson. That was one part of his legend. But you reached a point when he began to talk to us as fellow men. And we talked about Prop 42, and we talked about what he was going to do. Um, and it was interesting because I found myself um, where he had always encouraged me and lifted me and others up. I found myself encouraging him and said, Coach, this is very important. And it is important that you do it. He was going to do it. But I had matured to the point where I realized, Coach probably could stand for a change for some of the rest of us to encourage him and to stand behind him and defend him. And that's what happened. And from that moment on, our closeness and our bond never wavered. You mentioned Patrick, all of us had the same trajectory with Coach Thompson.
Yeah.
Kelly, Patrick and I just talked this morning. I mean, it's hard for us to even, some of us to even talk. It's hard not to get emotional.
I know.
But we were just saying to each other, if John saw us uh, feeling sad or down, he curses out. So we kind of have to get ourselves together and continue in his memory.
My brother, I have so much love and respect for you, and certainly for Coach John Thompson. He makes us all very proud. We got a lot to keep on marching on for. Mark Thompson, the man that you got to hear. Make sure you check out his podcast. Where can we hear it?
It's available on all the podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcast, folks. Make it plain.
All right. Appreciate you, man. God bless you.
All right. Thank you.
And welcome to the program. Joining me now, let me say this before I introduce these two gentlemen. We don't talk enough about Black history. When we usually talk about Black history, it's during the month of February. Yet there is a constant push to make sure that Black history is discussed 365 days a year, because it is all of our history. Black history, the traditional European-centric history. It's important that we understand what Blacks have accomplished in this country for 400 years and what we will accomplish in the future. So joining me now is Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Dr. Joel Freeman, and they are the authors of Black History, an inclusive account of American history. And it's a curriculum that they're introducing to the United States 365 days a year. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the program today.
It's good to be here.
Truly honored, Kelly.
I want to ask both of you, how did you come up with this idea of establishing a curriculum that can be taught in schools, and certainly in the midst of COVID-19, it's something that will likely have to be rolled out virtually for the foreseeable future. But how did you come up with this idea to make it an inclusive account of American history?
That's a great question. I am a former school superintendent for almost over 13 years. And I've known Joel Freeman for a long time, a very long time. And Joel and I will talk about different things. And I knew that there's a major gap in American schools where a lot of people don't understand that there's a correlation between the lack of culturally responsive education and the dismal impact it has on student achievement, particularly for Black children. And so we wanted to close that gap. So about 2.5 years ago, we embarked upon this amazing journey. Joel has done a remarkable job of being the curator of images that people have never seen before. And also he has a deep love for Black history, and so do I. So we said that we're going to do something about this. And so we started working, and in April, the state of Texas passed legislation that said every high school in the state must teach Black history, and they're expected to do that. And so that came at the right time when we were just finalizing our textbook. And now we hear that there's a cry across this nation and also Canada wanting to get this information. So Joel was the first person that I reached out to, that I called, and our journey has been nonstop ever since then.
Wow, Joel, I've seen your collection of so many artifacts. That's just basically fell right into your lap then with what Walter had portrayed, or actually when he reached out to you.
Yes, it's really been quite a journey. My first inkling of interest emerged, and passion emerged when I was working with the Washington Bullets, the Wizards, as one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA. Did that for 20 seasons, survived 6 coaching changes, and had a lot of questions from the players because their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. And they needed to test the seams of my soul to see if I was worthy of their trust. And so that was where things began. And then I began to see the power of the real. Of course, I co-wrote a book called Return to Glory, and a subsequent film version. And then the collection began to emerge. It's now over 3,000 pieces. The oldest piece dates back to 1553. And you interviewed me one time at the United Nations headquarters. I think we had 2 years that they invited me to exhibit, and we had well over 1 million people show up, and 3 times at the White House, twice at the Clinton Presidential Library. So when Walter called, we've known each other for over 2 decades, it didn't even take a moment for me to say, sure, let's do this, because a lot of the pieces of the collection are designed for an education piece like this. For instance, I have in my hand, this is from the mid-1800s from the Chukwe tribe in Angola. This is a talking stick. And you see the king, or the chief at the top, and he's playing a kalimba. And that means that he's relevant to all generations. So it's pieces like this that we have used as vehicles, as tools, if you will, to be able to engage the students. And the textbook is now 1,248 pages long, 10 units, starting in ancient Africa, because we didn't want to reinforce the notion, either implicitly or explicitly, that Black history started with slavery. So in the whole first unit, there's a lot of images, no pejorative images, but now we're ready for the good, the bad, the ugly of the last 4 centuries.
And we'll talk about that when we return with Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Joel A. Freeman, the authors of Black History, an inclusive account of American history, 365 days a year curriculum. Back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to Joel Freeman as well as Dr. Walter Milton Jr., and they are the authors of Black History, an inclusive account of American history. And what you're doing, gentlemen, is really astounding because you're offering a 365-day curriculum on Black history. And Joel, you were pointing out in the previous segment of how you have been able to get artifacts. And Walter, you were talking about the fact that Dallas has been doing this program to be all inclusive. I want to ask you both the significance of this, because in the midst of reporting history and archiving it and putting it out there for all of America, you're making history by making it available 365 days a year and getting it in school curriculums all across this country. So how does that equate to your level of expectations and the significance of this?
What we both see is this, first of all, this engages all ages. And the second thing is that we wanted to have something that would have a razor's edge to it. Now, I call Walter the trailblazer, the keeper of the razor's edge, because this is his experience. I'm from Canada. I have a white consciousness, a Canadian consciousness. Walter has the experience in education discipline, but also has the experience in America as a Black man. And the four things that we wanted to invite people to experience when they engage with this particular curriculum is that, number one, we want to invite people to become critical thinkers. So if they disagree, why? When one agrees, why? And then secondly, to become compassionate listeners. Thirdly, to become fact-based, respectful communicators. And fourthly, which is built on the first three, to become action-oriented solutionists. So that's the pathway, the superhighway, the theme that ran through the entire curriculum. And with Walter, he brought in such a wonderful experience to this. But we hope that this will impact this next generation, starting kindergarten, because every time there's a racially charged incident, people get on TV, talking heads I can almost guarantee you will say this statement in some way. We need to have a national conversation about race relations in America. And one gets the sense that a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they'll say the same thing. So Walter and I, we're solutionists. The way we protest is putting in 12 to 16-hour days for over 2 years to develop a curriculum, and then bringing a whole group around us of 50 people on a team to help bring a solution to the education gap in America. So that's our hope, is to impact, to have these conversations, these tough conversations started contextually at the kindergarten level all the way through 12th grade.
And Walter, if you're starting at the kindergarten level, of course, you're reaching students at the age of 5, and it's important to give them a view of the world other than what they've seen at home. And being able to provide this kind of education for them helps them grow up in understanding just how valuable all people are. Really, that helps with the conversation like we should be having right now to actually end racism and bring it to a successful end and completion of creating a beloved community. You can't do that without history.
Right. Well, one of the things that we've discovered is that it's imperative to have this conversation early. So currently, the textbook that has been completed is the 9th through 12th version. And in January, we have textbooks K2, grades kindergarten to second grade, grades 3, 5, and grades 6, 8. And we believe that it has to be a continuum. The reason that we started in 9th grade, because the state of, high school, 9th through 12th, state of Texas, their legislation said 9th through 12th grade. also other parts of the country are really interested in this age group too, because they're getting ready to exit school. They're getting ready, they're preparing to become life citizens and really participate in the democratic process, whether they go into higher ed or whether they go into the workforce. So they needed to have some information that was going to give them a really good exit in terms of participatory in the democratic process, participation. But also we know that we have to have the strong foundation. So that's why we wanted to cover all grade levels. But Joel said something that was incredible. He said that our textbook engages all ages. And what we're finding is that many adults and many citizens of this nation are interested in this information too, because their experience was void of Black history.
Yeah.
Our Black history textbook is very different. We've unearthed in our research things that people never heard of before. And we wanted to really bring this to the forefront so that people could have a clear understanding of the accomplishments and the successes that people of African descent have had in building and shaping this country. Not only that, shaping the world. And so we wanted to be very clear, very deliberate, and really getting that information out to everyone. And we believe that BH365, it's not only a textbook, but it's a healing mechanism for this world. And we're definitely geared and positioned and poised to bring about a strong sense of solutions as it relates to some of the things that are wreaking havoc in the world that plays itself out on social media and television every day.
You know, I'm glad you said that, because when we return, I want to drill down on that a little bit more, because I think both of you had hit the nail on the head. What we're going through right now, God knows we need what you're offering, a look at history, because the revisionist aspects of history is troubling, hurting, and it's gotten into the context of race and the racial divide that we have. So when we return, we'll talk about more about this wonderful and this wonderful project that's underway, and we've got to get behind it. Black History, an inclusive account of American history, with Doctors Walter Milton Jr. and Joel A. Freeman. Back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Joel A. Freeman, PhD. So Walter, it's in Dallas now, and when will we see it start coming out in other cities and states?
That's a great question. We are in the state of Texas. We're in a few districts in Texas, Dallas being the first district. Dallas was responsible for this outcry of Black history several years ago, and they fought for it, and the legislation was just passed. So Dallas selected our curriculum, our textbook, out of some of the major corporations. So we're very proud and excited about that. And then we're in different parts of the state as well. And we're looking at other parts of the country. We're in Prince George's County, one of the largest school systems in the nation. And we're looking at other national school districts like Denver, Colorado, and other large entities like Clark County, Nevada. We've been in conversations with them and a host of others. So we're trying to answer the question, Kelly, we're trying to get the book everywhere right now, and that's going to be a continuum. And then we also are pushing the book for the general market too, because we think that adults and children alike can really learn from this experience. And we have a wealth of curricula activities and community activities that can be beneficial and conducive for society at large.
That's awesome. And Joel, can we get access through a virtual connection now?
Yes, if a person goes to it's a really cool website we have. It's made up of elements of blackhistory365education.com. So blackhistory365education.com. And then people will be able to pre-order the textbook. They'll be able to participate and understand how to then engage their own superintendents around the country and create this groundswell of interest. Because a lot of people, you know, they take a look at what's going on all around us, Some might call it virtue signaling or whatever they get on social media, put up a few memes, and then there comes a profound sense of powerlessness, impotence.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've done is we've helped to provide a handle for people where they can get involved with a solution that we've developed for the education gap in America.
I love it. And from this platform to yours, this is always a platform that you can use. You can always come on the Kelly Wright Show and talk about little vignettes of Black history. In fact, gentlemen, I submit that to you. If you want to do it weekly, let me know. And you can come on and say, hey, did you know this happened? I would love to do that because I think we all, especially here on the Black News Channel, need to be illuminated by the truth and nothing but the truth. So Dr. Joel A. Freeman, Dr. Walter Milton Jr., authors of the Black History Curriculum 365. It's an inclusive account of American history. And Lord knows we need this right here, right now. What time is it? Right now. We got to have this on, especially in this pivotal election year. Gentlemen, I thank you both for having the tenacity and the perseverance to continue with this. It's a labor of love, but I know you've also sweated by the brow. So thank you for being on. And we're going to have KO on coming up next as we continue to take this important look at Black history and why it's so important to have it 365 days a year. Joel and Walter, thank you both. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
And as I mentioned, we're coming back with KO right after the break. And we're back with the program as we're talking about Black History 365, a curriculum that should be in our schools right now. Of course, it's starting in Dallas, Texas, and hitting the entire state. But we want to roll it out nationally. And one person to help do that is the multi-platinum music producer, K.O. Cates. And he joins us now. Kevin K.O. Cates is an award-winning, Grammy award-winning producer, super producer, if you will. The list of people that you've worked with are too many to name, but among them Snoop Dogg, Guapale, and Rick Ross, so many others. How did you get involved in using your music for a curriculum that will teach America and the world Black history 365 days a year?
Wow, well, thank you for having me on the show. I think, it all started where, of course, music has been my calling, my gift. And it started in about, I think it was 2008, around that time frame where, right before that, a little before that, I lost my father. He passed away. And he would always say, don't just be successful, be significant and leave a legacy behind. And I really went on a quest to try to see what is it that I could do to become significant, and, a lot of prayer and just, there was an award show that I was being honored at. And me and my wife and my son went to this award show, and the president of Martin Luther King's organization, Dr. Charles Steele, came to this hip hop award show and apologized to everyone in the room for not passing the torch and said it was a lot we can learn from each other. And that's when I realized that my generation has been so busy chasing money that we've been repeating that process. So I went on a quest of saying, okay, this is the road to become significant. And Bridge the Gap came to me in a dream, which Bridge the Gap is my nonprofit, but we ended up creating a textbook that teaches character building and life skills through hip hop music. So literally, in the height of my music career, took the leap, and took time out. A lot of people thought I was crazy, but literally full-blown textbook that teaches patience, self-determination, self-love, watching the company you keep, how to deal with losing loved ones, all these different things where, and I produce songs that go along with it. So now Bridge the Gap is, now we, fast forward 12 years later, we're in schools throughout the U.S. We're with the juvenile justice system. We're in schools in Africa and, the Bahamas. We've stopped gang wars, suicide, so many different things. I received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Obama. So it's been a lot of blessings from taking that leap. But that was the beginning of, I guess, taking the gift and seeing how to turn it into music. Joe, very good friends of mine. We all sat down, and when they were showing me the textbook and what they had done, I'm like, and I was showing them, they were seeing all the things I've been doing, and they're like, yo, this is amazing. And I'm like, I would love to be a part of history and actually create the music needed, to meet our youth where they are, that teaches our history.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Stay with me after the break. We'll come back and we'll talk more to Kevin K.O. Coates about all the great work that he's doing, not only in history books, but the fact that he's making history musically. Back with him after this. All the work that you're doing in terms of books and curriculum and keeping people inspired and informed is, one, aspirational and inspirational. And again, going back to what your father instilled in you, doing something significant. Everybody's in search of significance these days, Kevin, but they're not always reaching it. What would be your message to those who are frustrated because of COVID-19, frustrated because of racism, frustrated because of the political divide between conservatives and liberals?
Wow. I mean, my message, as I'm talking to our youth all the time through Bridge the Gap, we have so many we're mentoring on just getting prepared for this new normal, and helping them understand that, it's a lot. I mean, of course, there's a lot going on. Everyone's world got turned upside down, and it didn't help that, in the mix of this, all of the other things are going on that's really igniting that anger and frustration as well. Um, One of the things that I really talk about, though, to our youth, and I explain to them, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about the game of life. And I help them understand that I compare life to a video game. And I'm like, okay, so my favorite game is Mario Brothers, for example. So I'm like, as you're playing the game is set up to have pitfalls and things to make us lose our man and die. But we don't get upset and throw the game away when we lose. We learn from the mistakes and the pitfalls and see what's going on. And then we pass that level and we know the next level is going to be even harder, but we're excited and ready to go into it. And it's no different than what we're facing right now. This is a game of life. There's pitfalls. There's, things going on with our economy. There's things, but we have to, this is also time for us to sit back and reflect and see, okay, what do I need to do now? And what changes do I need to make so I can get to the end of this board and be ready to keep moving forward in life. So that's one of the things that I really, I really like to help them understand, because doing the same things in this new normal is not going to work.
Right.
We
Right.
have to, we have to do the audible. We have to change.
Which is why all of the curriculums that you're involved in, I think, is making an impact, because it's taking life historically, making sense of the present in order to pave way for a better future. And that's why I think it's so important that you're part of this project. Are you bringing other, well, I don't want to call them celebrities, but it is what it is. You have achieved that status. So are you bringing other people into this curriculum to help promote it?
Absolutely. I'm going to reach out. A lot of times with a lot of my peers, because everyone's so busy in their own world, and I can't expect people to, they, have the calling that I have, to where it's like I make the jump and sacrifice. But as things unveil and they see it, then they're like, okay, I what can I do? How can I help? So sometimes it's about building it and then they'll come. But I've definitely, been making some calls and getting some people on standby. In the meantime, the core curriculum and the songs for the curriculum's pretty much been laid out. But what we'll end up doing is adding a lot of my peers and friends in on the project and giving them featured verses to go into the blending with the rest of the curriculum. But the body of work is amazing. I brought in some of my artists and myself even, and it's amazing. I mean, the music is out of this world, brother. Some of my best work.
How does faith fuel what you do to bridge the gap, have a cool curriculum, and also now engaged in Black curriculum, Black History 365.
Actually being in a situation where, having my wife there with me to support me, and, being in a place where it's like, hey, got to take this leap. I don't know where it's going to take us, but we have to do it. And just taking those leaps and watching every time the leap was actually taken, how God will take care of everything else. You know what I mean? From Bridge the Gap, and it also helped me eliminate the sins and boxes, period, because a lot of times with our gifts, we like to categorize them. So if I just kept KO the producer, then I wouldn't have been able to truly use my gifts for what I was called to do. Yeah. So I think I'm really eliminating that box and taking those leaps and doing the uncomfortable things. There was a lot of sacrifice, over $1.5 million sacrifice with no money coming in, within our household. It was a real leap. There was a lot of things, but I knew the road to success I went through, being homeless, sleeping in my truck, going through things. So why would the road to significance not have sacrifice as well? So I feel like it was all a faith walk, every move. But every time I took a leap, God would bring the other pieces to the puzzle. And, it was just about taking the walk, man.
Hey, brother, you're always welcome on this show anytime. And in fact, if you want to share some of those Bridge the Gap and curriculum things that you're doing, we'd love to play it for you and show people just how much education you're providing out there. Appreciate you for being on the show. And we're back. I want to thank all of the guests who appeared on tonight's program. Mark Thompson talking about his mentor and the legacy of Georgetown coach John Thompson, who gave America so much beyond the basketball court. And then Black History 365 curriculum, the authors of that program. And let me not forget to thank Kevin K.O. Cates, a dynamic super producer, Grammy Award-winning artist who's giving back to the community by doing something significant, contributing to our history. And let me thank each and every one of you for taking the time out to watch. Hopefully tonight we've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading knowledge, love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price of forgiveness, and we all bleed the same. Hey. If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board. That means you and you on the love train. Get on board. Sisters, on the love train. Get on board the love train. Everyone's invited.